with the only cereal with brown sugar on it, and the only one with all the letters, too.
Oh, look at that. Question answered, I'd say. I mean, this is a commercial for kids with their favorite Warner Brothers characters. So, the question's answered, right? Are the Looney Tunes for kids? Yes.
Yep.
Video over. Well, no. But there is a tendency in the Looney Tunes fandom to argue the point after asking this question to teeming hordes of no one. And the defensive nature of the answer to this question is usually a lot more revealing of the Looney Tunes fan posing it than of any great insight as to the continuing impact of these characters. Basically, a lot of grown-ups who love these cartoons are tired of defending their love of stuff that is thought to be for kids. And I don't know why. What's up, docs and docettes? Trevor Thompson, the self-appointed Looney Tunes critic here, and I've heard this question ever since I was a kid, and the fact that I'm still hearing it today doesn't make sense to me. That's my first point in response to this question. I don't understand the question. First of all, strictly speaking of today, we're living in a time where it was never more sexy to be a grown-up who likes things from their childhood. Maybe that's why the new Sonic the Hedgehog movie looks like roided-up furry porn. Nostalgia is sexy, and Sonic is nostalgia. I'm 40, and I remember when Sonic came out, I was 15, and my family had just gotten a Sega Genesis. It transcends, it goes through the ages. That's why Mario's still a thing. So many of my generation grew up with the first Super Mario game on the original NES, and then their kids did too. Also, Marvel is quickly becoming the next Disney, and both are vying for the role of greatest nostalgia empire, not to mention all the reboots and redos of everything, and Keenan and Kel are back on the new Double Dare. It's like, really? Who now is arguing about Looney Tunes being for kids? I mean, there's no shame in being an adult who likes children's programming anymore. Maybe there should be, but there isn't. The new Double Dare is for kids and adults, preferably parents with their children, and it's one of many empires that's coming back as a result of that change in attitude. So my first angle on the question is just that. Simply not understanding the question. I mean, what tax-paying, sex-having, alcohol-drinking adult needs to have an argument at the ready for liking Looney Tunes? My second point in response to the question, are Looney Tunes for kids, is this. Who's asking? Well, who's asking and answering, really? Obviously not kids. Obviously that's an adult question, so what kind of adult is asking that question? It makes sense as an adult to ask the question of whether or not you want your kids watching these shorts because of the questionable content they sometimes exhibit. But if you're an adult who's answering in defense to other adults, how adult are you really? I mean, seriously. Here's how two adults would realistically argue about whether or not someone was too old to like these cartoons.
Oh my God. I'll make them look these two.
Cartoons? That's for kids.
Yeah. Go f*** yourself.
Alright.
So in keeping with that realistic look at the question at hand, let's break it down. Are the Looney Tunes for kids? Well, what are the Looney Tunes? What cartoons qualify as Looney Tunes in this question? Are we talking about this cartoon where Bugs Bunny takes pity on a poor little baby penguin and tries to get him back to his family? Or maybe we're talking about this Bugs Bunny cartoon where he rips a short man's fillings out with a magnet after goosing him with a carrot and exposing his naked groin. Are both of those cartoons for kids? What about the fables and fairy tales like Tom Thumb, the cartoon about the tiny little boy who sleeps in his daddy's beard? Or there's this Little Red Riding Hood cartoon where there's several shots of young teenage Red's skirt being hiked up over her waist, and the ending where she's spread-eagled over a fire? Yeah, it's like, one's for kids and one's not, but I just can't tell, because they're both Looney Tunes. Well, to be technical, some are Looney Tunes, some are Merry Melodies, because as I pointed out before, the Looney Tunes are not a generic name for these characters, but rather one of two specific names, and Merry Melodies being the other, that described at one time two very different types of cartoons, but that's not the point, is it? No, not my first point, second point, or this next one, which is the third point. The third point is this. Why is there no room for both in this question? Why, if something is for kids, can adults not love it, and vice versa? I mean, I grew up in the 80s, so a lot of my friends had RoboCop toys because they watched the RoboCop cartoon, and they probably watched the RoboCop movie, which is not a thing for kids at all. Maybe this is a bad example. Ghostbusters. I wouldn't say that the original Ghostbusters is for kids, but certainly kids like it, or it wouldn't have spawned the toys and cartoons that it did. Why, if the Warner Brothers cartoons are for adults, shouldn't it be for kids too? And if the cartoons are for kids, then why couldn't there be stuff in it that grown-ups dig on? I know these are kind of rhetorical questions to a moot point, but it's surprising to me how often none of this is considered when the question is abound, or if it is, it's not treated as the obviousness that it is. Obviously. Now, some might say television is what made the Looney Tunes cartoons and characters viable as kiddie fodder. After all, Disney was the first, in many ways, to make animation profitable on television while strictly targeting kids. So, that kind of sealed the deal on animation being primarily thought of as kids' entertainment, but don't forget, the first official Looney Tunes Merry Melodies show for television was the Bugs Bunny Show, and it was prime time. After 8 p.m., when the kiddies are asleep. And they showed cartoons on that show that were targeted to grown-ups. The Bugs Bunny Show aired shorts like High Note, a Chuck Jones cartoon about a musical note who gets falling down drunk and can't fit on the musical scale. Or Nellie's Folly, another Chuck favorite, about an adulterous female giraffe, neither of which would ever be shown on the likes of Captain Kangaroo. The Looney Tunes shorts exist in their own world, really. Chuck and Frizz love to say that they made them to satisfy themselves, and that may be true. But because animation is, and especially then, was so fantasy-loaded as a genre, it's sometimes difficult to see the older stuff as anything but innocent, and by proxy, a lot more childlike. Basically, and from the comfort of 2019, we can safely say that there are plenty of examples to cite as proof that the cartoons are for kids, and there are plenty of examples to cite as proof that kids shouldn't watch them. So, who's right? Well, neither of you. Seriously. If you're arguing with someone that Bugs and his friends are for kids, and that person is saying they're for adults and adults only, guess what? You're both wrong. Sorry to spoil the party, but the Looney Tunes are for everyone, and that's why they have endured this long. And it's not a mistake either. It's by design. Speaking of design, the characters' designs changed dramatically over the 3 decades that the shorts were in production, but the cartoons being for everyone, that's a staple. No matter what the future holds for the Looney Tunes Merry Melodies franchise, if it can be called that, it will never change the fact that these characters are rooted in their past, in a time when their cartoons were made to go with feature presentations in movie theaters. From the early 30s to the late 60s, cartoons were a part of a package of things that played before a movie. These things were called short subjects, and they could be anything from a newsreel to a travelogue to movie previews to cartoons. In fact, you can see this at play in Who Framed Roger Rabbit, a movie that takes place in 1947, in the scene where Eddie and Roger hide in the movie theater. We see that they're watching a cartoon, and then a newsreel comes on. Obviously, they hadn't been hiding in the theater for very long. So, the thing about short subjects is this. They went before all kinds of movies. Kids' films, dramas, comedies, racy stuff, horrors, family stuff, all of it. So since the cartoons were never made with any prior knowledge of what movies they'd be appearing in front of, as that would vary from theater to local theater, they had to appeal to a general audience. Remember, this was a time before the movie rating system had been implemented, and general audience didn't just mean the G rating that we've all come to know as being for kids. General audience was literal back then. A general audience was an audience of the general public, which meant you had to have something for everyone, and you had to entertain in a very broad way. So the reason that the Looney Tunes were always for kids, and always for adults, and always for everyone is because they were never intended to be anything else. That's why even in the early 40s, during the war, there were kiddie cartoons that featured the characters in happy stories, and grown-up cartoons that featured frontal female nudity. That's why, all these decades later, there's Looney Tunes series targeted to young adults, kids, and even toddlers, it too with a fair amount of frontal female nudity. But seriously, to be able to appeal to almost everyone is a part of their DNA, the very fabric of Bugs, Daffy, and the rest. So, if you want to know why there's even a question about whether they're for kids or adults, it's because they're so clearly for both, and they've made so many good things targeted to those different crowds, and there's such a rich history of both. That's why the question has gone on. So there, I've answered the question, are Looney Tunes for kids? The answer is no, they're for everyone, and they always have been. There you have it, gang. I've answered the question for all time, and it never need be asked again, and if someone should ask it around you, save your breath and instead waste your Wi-Fi showing them this video. The question is lame now, you're a hack for still asking it, and here's why. I would have named the video that, but as a title, it's like whatever the opposite of clickbait is. Click repellent? I don't know. What I do know is, that's gonna do it for this Looney Tunes Quickie. I'm Trevor Thompson, the self-appointed Looney Tunes critic, and until next time, that's all, folks.
He is a stinker.
Cartoons? You know those are for kids, right? Cartoons? Oh, busted a f***ing button! I'm so fat! God damn it!
That's our mating call, Liz Lemon. Oh, man. This is funny. This is funnier than you. Commitment. He's actually dead.